Oh, so hi, my name is Aline. I am an iOS software engineer at Uber in São Paulo, and I work on a safety team. But today, I'm going to talk a little bit about feature flags, which is one of the things that helped Uber get to the scale of the app that we have. And talk a little bit about the good stuff, also the bad stuff that happens. But, like my friend Vincent did, I did some fancy functional programming with my title. I got the meme. So what is a feature flag? It's just a Boolean somewhere. It's true or false. It's something that's on or off. It is simple as that, but also complicated as that. Which also means that's probably going to be an if somewhere that's going to check if this is on, do things, or else do that thing. That's just the basic stuff. Also, usually feature flags or experiments come from a backend somewhere. So it has to be remotely configured from, it could be Firebase. They have a pretty good support for experimentation, A/B testing, and remote configuration. You can build your own. Like that's the case for Uber and a lot of large companies that you have to have specific controls. But a quick Google search on feature flagging and experimentation on Google showed me a lot of companies that are already doing that. I didn't try anyone, but that really depends on the size of your app and what you want to build. At Uber, we do have this policy that everything should be behind a feature flag. And I mean, it's everything. Except from core, we do have a core that has the very, very, very minimum that you get. You type an address, you get an Uber to you, and you enter the car and get to the address. That's the very minimum. Like, even canceling a trip is not core. Like, your menu is not a core. Everything outside of that is not core. So that means that everything can be turned off. We don't want anyone to have that experience, but if everything goes south, you can still get an Uber to you. And we also do that even for bug fixes. If you do a pull request with a bug fix that's 4 lines, sometimes your bug fix can have worse behavior and be more buggy than the previous bug. That happens. Like, you fix a bug and you put a worse one. So sometimes we do, sometimes no, always we do feature flagging of bug fixes. A few pros of using feature flags, of course. You can turn on and off production code without changing the code. Grabbing to App Store reviews, people do not update their app when you release them. And you can just have complete control on when people are going to see the feature. You can refactor stuff very safe. So you can change a feature that's been there since 4 years, and you change to new UI, new stuff. But you can keep the old one in there for a couple months until you are completely sure that the new one is good. This is not very usual, but you can avoid the rebase hell. We have over 300 iOS engineers in one monorepo. So that's, if I do 1 week without rebasing, it's chaos. So we don't do a feature branch and stay for 2-3 weeks working on a feature branch and then go back to master. So we ship very small things directly to master, but turned off. So that helps also on product testing and designer testing. And we can allow features to be on just for employees and not for other people. We can do a lot of that stuff. Something that's not there, but we also do, is using the same flags that's already going to say true or false. But it can say true for Brazil or true for United States. We have features that are very local to somewhere. So it doesn't make sense to ask a CPF for an American or this kind of thing. So we do use the same feature flags to return true just for a country or just for, I don't know, whatever it looks like. Getting to some practical example, pretty normal, a setting screen from an app. It has groups of settings. So you can imagine it's like general settings, camera settings, payments, and like regular settings page. And you can say that each one of them is a group of settings. And like I said, we do like everything to be behind a feature flag. So imagine one of them doesn't work well. Would it be better for everybody to have the app crashing, or just removing one group entirely and you can just go ahead with others? That might be better. So yeah, we want to be able to turn off or on each settings group the way that we want to. There are two main types of experiments and feature flagging, which is cached experiments. When the app starts, we download a bunch of true and falses and save it somewhere and just get the result. And there's also the kind of reactive experiment where whenever you change, it happens automatically. And you can get that behavior with sockets or Firebase or stuff like that. But that looks really cool in theory, but it's not. Imagine that everything you do, you have to be prepared for disappearing on the screen, or the user is looking at the screen and like something just disappears, a button disappears. It's a bit weird. So we do most of experiments cached and only use this kind of reactive experience when we really need to. And we were okay with like we turn off something and some people are gonna see it for a while, for one run, and the next run they're gonna be not seeing it. I'm not gonna talk about how to do this caching or how to do the experiment itself. And whenever you're not ready to talk about implementation, you put it behind a protocol, right? So this is a protocol that's I'm just gonna say which experiments that I wanna see and check if it's on. That's pretty easy. The implementation behind is gonna be very, you need to know, it depends on what you're gonna do, if you're in a Firebase or backend or whatever. So that's very specific to the project. But this is not. You can have a protocol and check if something is on. And remember the settings. So I do have a simple enum that has each of the settings group that's gonna show. And I need to know for each of the groups if they're on or not. So if they're on, I'm gonna put them on the screen. If they're not, it's not gonna be there. Pretty normal. I start with an if. That's what I said, just put an if somewhere. And check if this is on, put it on the screen. And you separate ifs. And that does not look good. It's very hard to test. It's very easy to make mistakes. Someone could come in and put an else if somewhere, because it looks like an else if, and it's not. It's going to break. And this is very hard to test and maintain, especially if you want to do extra checking. So the VIP sessions are going to show only if the user is a VIP. And this is going to show only if the user has accepted the camera permissions, and et cetera. We usually want some more verification than just a feature flag. The feature flag is just the gate. And this is not maintainable at all. You can... this code is not going to crash Xcode, but it could. Xcode crashes. So the idea here is, instead of the settings screen somewhere deciding which ones they're going to put in their screen, we're going to put the responsibility back to each feature. So each settings group, each feature is going to decide for itself if this should show or not. That's the main idea, separating responsibility. And we can go back to design patterns and very standard stuff and build a factory. We call it plugins at Uber, but it's a simple plugin feature factory something. And the factory is going to have two things. One of the things is applicable function, and it has to return a Boolean. So this factory is going to tell you how to build the feature, but also it's going to tell you if the feature is on or not. And here you can put the experimentation checking, the feature flagging checking, but you can also put more other verification. And your feature decides for itself if it should show or not. And like a factory, it has to know how to create what you're going to build. So I have this feature. How do I create it? It's very easy in Swift. You can just have a callback. And here you can pass any dependencies that you need. So if your feature itself has dependencies, you can pass it down. I'll just show an example later. And, but coming back to what I was saying, what is a feature? A feature is literally anything. Feature, I put it as any object because it could be anything. It could be a Y-view controller. It could be a worker. It could be a builder. It could be the settings group that we were talking about. It's generic. You can call feature anything you want, as long as it builds something that you can put on the screen, or you can do something in the background, or like be creative. It's anything that you do. So the plugin factory itself, to accommodate this, that the feature can be anything, we just put a generic there. And the plugin factory has a plugin type that can conform, that you just conform your feature to it, and it can be anything. So, for example, I'm going to show you how to use that for camera settings plugin factory. And in it, we do just tell you how to build my group. Here it's very simple, you just build. But if you have any dependencies, you can just pass to the factory and pass to the settings group, and the dependencies are going to go there. But the main thing is tell you how to build this class. And that is applicable, you just override it and tell you how to check if your feature is on or not. So you check for the camera, but you can also check if user has accepted the camera or not, or you can do your own custom is on, is the feature there or not. So the main thing that we did is getting each feature to decide for itself if it's on or not. But we don't fix the problem, because we would still be needing to check for each of them if they're on or not. And that's why we do the other thing, which is grouping them. So imagine we have a feature, and we have the factory. The feature is not inside the factory, but the factory tells you how to build the feature. And it asks, like, should I build this, and how to build this? That's a factory. But we do have this plugin point that is going to have an array of plugin factories. And if we have an array of plugin factories, now we have one single point that knows about all the features and can iterate it through them and knows which one to build or not. So the plugin point is going to look something like this, very simplistic version of it. You have literally an array of plugin factories. And you can group features that looks the same, looks similar, like features for settings or stuff. And just return each plugin factory that you built before for each of the features. And when you're using it, there on the settings page or whatever architecture that you're using, you're just going to have this plugin point, which is one thing, and ask to create. And it's going to return an array of all the features that are created, but you don't need to know how they were created or like why or where they come from. You just get them built and put on the screen or attach them or whatever your feature is. And the plugin point looks something like this. You have this create plugins is a method that's just gonna go through all the active features and create them. We pass a function, we can just call it, and they're just gonna be built somewhere. And the active features, now it's some other fancy functional programming. I don't know, should I use $0 for it to be fancy? But we just filter is applicable, and each feature factory is going to decide for itself if it should be built or not. So right now, we have one single point that we can, the settings have one class that's going to tell me just what should I show on the screen. I don't need to have a bunch of things. So if other people, other modules, wants to put more things here, they don't have to mess around with my code. They just have to put one line in their array and build the features in their module. It's not going to have any incompatibility. I do like the word trade-off because it's like cons, but we like trade-offs better. The first trade-off is overhead. It does add more complexity to your project, and sometimes it's not worth it. It's a lot more stuff to think about, and although this architecture looks cool, of course it's like one-tenth of what we do at Uber. It's very simplified, but it does cause complication when we're actually building, and it takes more time to build features. But we do have a safety net all the time, so if anything doesn't work, or if we want to roll out for just a country or things like that, it's always safe. It's always been built like that. There is a possibility to have a lot of dead code, and it does happen. It's a very easy trade-off. We have the safety to go back to old code or turn off things, but there are things that are there like for years off, and nobody deletes that. And we do have a lot of dead code. So we always have to remember to go back and clean after yourself. So put a reminder in the calendar to go back and delete that code 3 months later, something like that. There is also the problem of state. If you have a lot of experiments, you can have a lot of possibilities of things on or off, and it's hard to know how exactly will they interact with each other. So something is not working, and it might be happening because of interactions between experiments that you did not test and you did not anticipate at all. So that can happen. And of course, we're removing a little bit of, we're putting a safety net on the code. Humans can write bad code. Even the best software engineers can make mistakes. But we can also make mistakes when we're configuring the feature flags. So it can happen, like we did all of this very safety net for your code, but then you go there and you configured something wrong and you just released it wrong. It can happen. And in the end, it's very much a trade-off that we do. So feature flags can help us a lot, and we can have safety nets for turning off code in production, for rollouts. If you have the if there, if you have the plugin point there, your server can return true or false for 10%. It can return true for, I don't know, just people that use, they're in Brazil, or just people that are in Buenos Aires. We can do that, and that helps with rollouts. That helps on testing new features. We can roll out slowly, check the analytics, and then roll out later. And it does have that really good safety thing for the code. Just going over everything that we said. So feature flags is basically an on and off switch in the code. Features can be anything. They can be something on the screen, but they can be like a request that you do on AppStart, or Bluetooth things. It can be anything you want, any class, any type that you need. The main thing here is to delegate decisions to the features itself. So you don't decide which ones are on. The features decide for itself which ones are on. And of course, there are trade-offs. Nothing is perfect. They do add a lot of overhead when you're building things, and they can cause problems with that code, and misconfigurations can happen. And that's it. They're my contact if anybody wants to have any questions. I think we have time.
Yes, we have time for questions. Anyone would like to? So, any candidate for a question? Here.
Thank you very much. I have a question about how you handle change. Like, if the new implementation changes something that the old implementation was relying on, like, do you duplicate the files, for example, and wait until that new solution oversees the previous one, or how do you handle that?
It depends a lot. You know, it can be a change on like just UI or something small, and then we can do A/B testing first, or small rollouts, or just roll out, and if there's anything wrong, we go back. But if there's something bigger, like a whole feature or something, we can just build the new one like concurrently and just maintain the old one, build the new one. When it's ready, we start rolling out, check if there's no regressions from the old feature. And you know, it's very broad. It's something that we discuss with product in the beginning. If you're just refactoring or building something that's already there, there's something we discuss in the beginning, how we're going to roll out, what strategies we're going to take to do this.
Great, thank you. Anyone? Yeah. Incoming.
So, great talk, Aline. Thanks for sharing it with us. I have two questions. The first one is, do you guys ship unfinished code to the master? And if that's the case, how do you ensure that this code won't be available for the end user? And the other question is, I forgot the other question. So while you answer this first one, yeah. I'll think about it.
Yes, we do ship unfinished code to master that. Like your Uber app has a lot of unfinished code, and that's a strategy that Uber engineers decided in the beginning because, like, there are trade-offs, but it's a good thing. It helps them productivity and everyday life, but we for making sure I do trust the engineers that work on the experimentation platform and that works on platform, that they make sure that this is not gonna show if it's off, it's really off, and it's gonna be very hard to turn it on. So I trust the platform team that they do a really good job in there.
Sure. The other question is actually related to one of the topics that Chris talked about earlier today. That is, do you have any mechanism to reproduce specific user feature flag state for a crash, for instance?
Yes, it's not as good as like replaying every step that the user did, but we do with crash reports and bug reports. We have a lot of logs that tell us where he was, what flags were on, so it can help us debug that. But it's not as cool, but it works very well to find where the bug is.
Okay, thank you.
We have time for one more. Anyone else? There it is. Any of the girls can go there. I'll go for you afterwards.
Hi, thanks for the comp. My question is probably related to the one that was asked before. Do you have any special considerations regarding feature flags for security reasons, like, I don't know, extra checks or whatever, to make sure that a feature that is turned on cannot be, maliciously turned on or something like that? Like, for example, if it's not ready or if it's a VIP feature or whatever?
Oh, yes. Like I said, I do trust the platform team that does a really good job on that. and the part of just building the feature. But like if we have something that's very concerning, or we cannot really turn on before the launch, we do take special care on that. But usually the normal thing is just to ship off, and the default is always for off. So if something goes wrong on the networking and stuff, the default is always off. So everything, the default is off. So users may not see the features that should be on, but everything is going to be off. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, we have one more.
Okay.
Are you all right with that? Okay. Okay, it's exactly the same
So,
question. So
good.
thank you very much, Aline.
Thank you.